This presentation on human chimeras is brought by the Personal Genome Learning Center. What is a chimera? In general, a chimera is an organism that has genetic material from two or more sources. Hence, the famous mythical creature named the chimera, with the body of a lion and the head of a goat. In science, chimeras are frequently in the form of plasmids, where plasmid DNA is introduced into a new genome. Human chimeras are individuals who have two different sets of DNA in their body. A chimera should not be confused with a mosaic, which occurs when one division of a zygote undergoes a genetic mutation. A chimera involves DNA from two separate entities, such as two zygotes, which fuse and grow together. The first type of human chimera comes from absorbing a twin in the womb. There was a story of a woman who needed a kidney transplant and underwent genetic testing along with her family to see if a family member could donate one to her. But the tests suggested that genetically, the woman could not be the mother of her son. The mystery was solved when doctors discovered that the woman was a chimera. The set of DNA in her blood cells was different from that in the other tissues of her body. The image on the left shows a woman who merged with her twin in the womb, and half of her stomach is that of her twin. Another type of human chimera comes as a result of pregnancy. When a woman becomes pregnant, a small number of cells from the fetus migrate into her blood and travel to different organs. Fetal cells may stay in a woman's body for years, or, depending on their location, for the rest of their mother's life. This tends to go undetected, unless the woman was pregnant with a son, in which then the cells would contain a Y chromosome. Another type of human chimera comes from the result of a bone marrow transplant. A person will have his or her own bone marrow destroyed and replaced with bone marrow from another person. Bone marrow contains stem cells that develop into red blood cells. This means that for the rest of his or her life, a person with a bone marrow transplant will have blood cells that are genetically identical to those of the donor. In some cases, all of the blood cells in a person who received a bone marrow transplant will match the DNA of the donor. But in other cases, recipients may have a mix of their own blood cells and the donor cells. A blood transfusion will also temporarily give a person cells from someone else. But unlike in a bone marrow transplant, stem cells are not involved, and the new cells are not permanent. The goal of a bone marrow transplant is to replace weak cells with strong ones. There was a story of a man in Nevada who found that initially, while only the DNA in his blood was that of his donor, eventually cheek swabs and sperm DNA came back as a match to the donor as well. This gives rise to questions about committed crime. There was a story of a man who came back as a DNA match on a crime scene, but it was found that he was already in jail during the time when the crime was committed. It turns out he had been a bone marrow donor for his brother, and his brother, who had actually committed the crime, shared his brother's DNA. This can also cause problems with the rise in DNA consumer testing. If it is to be believed that bone marrow transplants can affect sperm DNA, if a person were to have children after a bone marrow transplant, genetically, the child could be that of the donor. This can lead to immense confusion if the child shows up on the donor's family tree. Human chimeras that occur naturally tend to go unnoticed, but have been discovered by accident through involvement in crime, parental DNA tests, and other genetic tests, which come back with surprising and confusing results.